Haley thought the divorce would be ugly, but she didn't expect to be locked out overnight. Bank access cut, paperwork missing, and her husband's family acting like she'd never mattered. She didn't cry. She started building a case. If you've been blindsided like that, share what happened to you in the comments. After he filed for divorce, Ethan Caldwell and his family put Haley Steinfeld on the porch with nothing but an old suitcase, sure she was a nobody from nowhere. It was a regular Chicago weeknight, the kind that still smelled like toner and burnt office coffee on her sleeves. She turned into the driveway and stopped. The porch light was on, every downstairs lamp glowing, and the front door wore a new deadbolt. Her keys scraped uselessly. She tried again, slower, like politeness might help metal. Haley rang the bell. The door opened a few inches. Ethan filled the gap, shirt crisp, face flat. Over his shoulder stood his mother, Carol, and his younger brother, Mason, both planted like they'd already voted. "You're not living here anymore," Haley kept her voice even. "Open the door." Ethan didn't move. "Your things are packed." Carol pointed at the concrete step. A scuffed suitcase sat there, the kind sold at airport kiosks for people who forgot they owned luggage. "Your stuff is in that." Haley looked at it, then at Carol's manicured hand. How thoughtful. "At least it's not a trash bag." Mason gave a small laugh that died when Ethan glanced back at him. Haley leaned to the side, trying to see the foyer table where they usually tossed mail. A stack of envelopes was still there, held down by a ceramic bowl. Her hand reached automatically. Carol snatched the top piece away before Haley's fingers touched paper. The envelope showed a corner of writing. H. Stet. Don't touch our mail. You're nobody here. The words landed like a stamp, final and casual. Haley turned her head toward the doorbell camera. Its tiny lens stared back like an eye that never blinked. Ethan followed her glance. The camera's been broken since last week. It was said too quickly, like a line rehearsed for someone else. "Where are the tax files?" "And the company records?" Ethan's jaw tightened, then softened into something close to a smirk. "Don't make this difficult. At the disclosure deadline, my attorney will file what's required." Behind him, Mason shifted. Cardboard edges appeared from the hallway, boxes being carried toward the garage. Ethan lifted 2 fingers, and Mason moved faster. For a second, between a box and Ethan's shoulder, Haley saw a familiar folder, thick and navy, the one Ethan always kept near his laptop. It vanished as if the hallway swallowed it. She set her work bag down and zipped the suitcase. The handle stuck, then slid up with a click that sounded too loud for the moment. "Is this really what you want?" Ethan's eyes stayed on her, not on the suitcase. "It's what needs to happen." Haley rolled the suitcase down the courthouse steps, its wheels rattling across the seams of concrete. At the curb, she summoned a rideshare and opened her phone's cloud app to retrieve the documents she had uploaded months earlier. Session expired. The message blinked at her. She re-entered the password, once, then again, while the login field pulsed with quiet indifference. A car pulled up with its hazards blinking. Haley slid into the back seat, the suitcase upright between her knees. She tried the password one last time, watched the same red error, then turned the phone face down and gave the driver Marisol Vega's address. Streetlights smeared across the glass as the city blurred past. Haley kept both hands wrapped around the suitcase handle, as if it might try to escape. In Pilsen, the driver stopped in front of a brick walk-up. She paid, murmured thanks, and carried the suitcase up 2 flights, each step echoing in the stairwell. Marisol opened the door before Haley could knock twice. "Come in." She stepped aside, a set of keys hanging from her fingers, and nodded toward a narrow stretch of wall by the entry. "Put it there. You can have the corner. That's the deal." Haley parked the suitcase tight against the baseboard, leaving enough room for Marisol to pass without turning sideways. Marisol took Haley's coat, hung it on a hook, and pointed at the kitchen table. "House rules, no surprises. If you're coming in late, text me. If you need space, say it. And don't leave paperwork everywhere." She set a plastic storage box on the table, the lid marked in thick black letters, "Papers." You want to survive? You start with papers. Haley nodded once and unzipped the suitcase. The contents weren't dramatic. Work pants, a few sweaters, a toiletry bag. But she laid each item on the couch, snapped a photo, and put it back in a neater stack. Receipts and stray mail went into the box without ceremony. "Can I borrow your Wi-Fi?" Marisol slid a scrap of paper across the table with the network name and password. "Don't use it for anything illegal." Haley connected her phone, opened her email, and saw the password had been changed. A recovery code prompt appeared, and the confirmation number was going to a device she didn't recognize. Marisol watched her tap through screens and didn't ask for a story. Instead, she pulled a thin blanket from a closet and tossed it over the arm of the couch. "It's not much, but it's clean." "I've slept in airports. This is an upgrade." Her phone buzzed with an unknown number from work. She answered on the second ring, keeping her tone level. "Haley Steinfeld speaking." "Hi, Haley. This is Dana from HR. We're hearing there may be a personal legal matter that could affect your availability." "I'll be at work tomorrow." "Okay, just keep us updated." The call ended with a click that felt too careful. A minute later, a text from a former neighbor popped up. "Heard Ethan says you took company money. You okay?" Haley didn't reply. Marisol didn't hover, but she didn't pretend this was casual either. She took a spare key off her ring and set it next to the papers box. "If you leave, you lock up. If you lose that key, you replace it." "Fair." "Bathroom's down the hall. Towels are in the second drawer. I'm up at 6. I don't do midnight conversations." Haley nodded, then kept working. She found her charger, plugged it in, and lined the suitcase receipts along the table edge. A crumpled parking stub, a dry cleaning tag, a couple of pay stubs, nothing heroic, just proof that her life had existed before tonight. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Ethan. The screen showed his name like an insult, wearing a suit. Haley let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text arrived. "Stop making a scene." She set the phone down and slid it away, as if it might leak. Marisol noticed the motion. "You don't have to explain," Marisol said, "but you do have to eat." Marisol set a paper plate in front of her, rice and something warm from a pot. Haley ate standing, 2 bites, then went back to the table. The food didn't help. It only steadied her hands while she called her carrier. The rep confirmed. A device change had been authorized that day. She opened her banking app. Joint account restricted. A call to the bank ended in an automated message. The primary account holder has placed limitations. On the table, Marisol's box waited like a directive. Haley opened a forwarded envelope with the court's seal. Inside, notice of hearing, disclosure form, bold deadline. She pulled the papers box closer and started sorting. Before sunrise, she left with the box in one arm and the suitcase in the other. The law library near the loop opened early. She liked its predictability. At the desk, she asked for the self-help section and chose a table where no one looked up. She filled each form in block letters, checked twice, and stacked them neatly. When asked for supporting documents, she unzipped the suitcase. Shirts, toiletries, receipts. Photographed, logged, returned. Boring work, steady work. Her hand caught a loose seam. Inside, a flat envelope taped to the lining. No return address. She opened it. A bank statement and a short letter on CPA letterhead. The date stopped her. It was 10 days before Ethan had claimed the doorbell was broken. Haley laid the page flat, opened her notebook, and wrote the date. Then another. The night the locks changed. Another. The day the account froze. A thin line connected them. She circled one transaction, slow and precise. Consulting fee. $18,450. Next to it, she wrote, "Who pays this and calls it normal?" A man at the next table cleared his throat, but Haley didn't look up. She copied the CPA's name, address, and phone number from the letter. Not proof, just a thread. And a thread was enough to keep going. The printer hummed somewhere behind her. People passed with armfuls of paper. Haley kept adding to her timeline. Camera broken. disclosure deadline, lines and boxes stacking like a quiet argument. When the form asked for her full legal name, she paused, then wrote it quickly, without flourish. The next line, Ethan's attorney, was already memorized. She fed the pages into the copy machine, one at a time. On the sheet with her name, her hand slid forward, covering the last line as it scanned. A librarian stopped nearby. "You can't staple anything to the books." "I'm not," Haley said. "Just my life." The woman blinked and walked away. Haley clipped the copies together, slid the bank statement behind the timeline, and labeled it Exhibit Draft. The CPA letter followed. On a sticky note, she listed what came next: verify accounts, request statements, confirm filings, keep order. Her phone buzzed with another unknown number. She ignored it, reopened the court website, and reread the disclosure rules until they sounded procedural, not personal. An hour later, she folded the timeline, slipped it into a plain folder, and labeled the tab, Hidden Assets equals not a mistake. She printed a final copy, squared the stack, and left the law library. Outside, she checked the court docket once more before heading toward the bank on Clark. At the counter, she handed over her ID and the account numbers. "I need official statements for the joint checking and the savings." The teller's tag read Nia. She typed, paused, then dropped her voice. "There's a note from the primary account holder." "What kind of note?" "Restrictions. I can print what's permitted, but I can't remove them without his authorization." "Can you confirm when the restrictions were added?" Nia tore a thin receipt strip, wrote a date, and slid it across. "That's the day it changed." She reached for the printer, produced 2 pages, and stamped them. "That's all I can give you today." Haley scanned the header lines. Several rows read, "Statement unavailable." "Is anything missing because of the restrictions?" Nia's eyes flicked up. "I can't say it that way. I can say you're not seeing everything." "Got it." Haley tucked the strip into her folder. "Thank you." She stepped away and called the bank support line. The menu offered fraud, lost cards, and loan questions. None of it fit. She ended the call and walked out with her folder pressed to her side. In the parking lot, an email arrived from Ethan's attorney. The subject line was long and polite, which made it worse. The letter accused her of interfering with company operations and warned that any attempt to access proprietary financial records could cause harm. A motion was attached, asking the court to limit her access until further order. She saved it, then crossed toward the courthouse. Security moved her through with the usual routine. Past the checkpoint, the hallway opened into rows of doors and posted calendars. Haley headed for the clerk's window, keeping her eyes on the signs, not the people. A laugh she recognized cut across the hallway. Carol Caldwell stood by a vending machine with Mason and a cousin Haley had met once at a holiday party. They weren't waiting for anything. They were planted in the only path to the clerk. Carol's gaze flicked to Haley's folder. "Well." Mason didn't bother lowering his voice. "She doesn't even have a home." Haley kept walking. Carol shifted just enough to force a choice. "Haley, honey, this doesn't have to be messy. It's already messy." Carol's smile stayed in place. "Ethan built that company. You can't just show up and take things." "I'm showing up to file papers." At the clerk's window, Haley asked for a stamped copy of her submission and the next deadline sheet. The clerk slid the printout back. "Disclosure form due by the date listed." "Thanks." Behind her, Carol made a soft sound, like approval. "See? Even the court has rules." Haley left without answering. Outside, she pulled out the CPA letterhead copy she'd found in the suitcase lining and called the number. A receptionist picked up. "Accounting Associates, how can I direct your call?" "I need to confirm a transaction labeled consulting fee posted on this date." A hold tone clicked once. Then a man came on. "This is Robert." "My name is Haley Steinfeld. I have a statement showing a consulting fee tied to Caldwell Ventures. I need to know what it was for. I'm not permitted to discuss any client matters. I'm asking what service was billed. I can't speak with you. Who can? No one at this office. The line disconnected. 10 minutes later, another email landed, this time from Ethan, copied to his attorney. The message was short. You're harassing our vendors and making things worse for yourself. This is on you. Haley forwarded it to a new folder labeled Court and put her phone away. Back at Marisol's apartment, the kitchen table turned into a workstation again. Haley tried an old cloud storage account she'd used for tax backups. The password worked. The dashboard loaded. Then the page refreshed and went blank. Account deleted. She opened her old laptop, clicked the backup folder, and watched it vanish into a gray icon labeled Access Denied. She tried the login again. Same result. A notification flashed that a device had requested a remote security change. Marisol texted from work. Still breathing? Haley typed back. Yes, the kind of breathing they charge for. She grabbed her coat and headed to a small storage place near a laundromat, a row of narrow units she'd rented months earlier for overflow. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and cardboard. She knelt at her unit, slid her key into the padlock, and felt it catch wrong. The lock wasn't hers. A security guard rounded the corner, one hand on his radio. Ma'am, you can't be here. This is my unit. Louise glanced at the padlock, then at a clipboard. Not anymore. The account shows a change. If you need access, you call the office. Haley kept her key on the lock for a second longer, like pressure might turn metal into permission. When nothing moved, she let go and stepped back. Who requested the change? Louise shifted his weight. I don't get that information. Of course you don't. She walked out without arguing. The sidewalk felt uneven, and the folder under her arm bent at the corners. By the time she reached the train, another email had arrived from Ethan's attorney. The same polished tone, the same warning that she was creating risk for the company. It wasn't a threat on paper. It was a leash with letterhead. Marisol's kitchen table was already cleared when Haley came in. A mug waited near the papers box, and a sticky note on it read, Drink this before you do something stubborn. Marisol was on her feet, shoes still on, work bag half open. How bad? The storage unit is locked. New lock. Marisol didn't gasp or ask why. She just nodded like it fit the pattern. Sit. Haley didn't sit. She opened her laptop, pulled up the court portal, and checked the filing deadlines again. A new message sat in her inbox, forwarded from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line looked like a vendor thread. Invoice question, Caldwell. It had been sent to Ethan and then accidentally forwarded to her old shared address, the one he hadn't fully scrubbed yet. That mistake lasted about as long as a flickering streetlight. But it was long enough. The email included a PDF snippet. The header read, Caldwell Consulting, LLC. Below it, a line item repeated month after month. Advisory Services. The amounts weren't huge individually. The total, at the bottom, was. Haley saved the attachment, then opened Ethan's most recent court filing. The asset disclosure section had neat boxes with neat labels. One box, the one that should have listed business interests beyond the primary company, sat blank. Marisol leaned over the back of a chair. So he's paying someone. Or paying himself under a different name. Marisol pointed at the empty disclosure box. And pretending it doesn't exist. Haley printed the PDF at Marisol's small printer, watched the ink stutter, then tried again on draft mode. A page came out looking pale and stubborn, which was fine. She didn't need pretty. She needed legible. The choice in front of her didn't come with drama. It came with deadlines. Staying silent meant keeping the peace, keeping her job, keeping her head down. It also meant accepting that Ethan would walk away with the company, the accounts, and the story. Filing a counterclaim meant stepping into the fight on paper, where Ethan had lawyers and she had a borrowed table and a printer that wheezed. Marisol crossed her arms. You keep trying not to make it a big thing. They made it a big thing for you. Haley's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The thought that surfaced wasn't romantic or brave, it was practical. If she didn't push now, the court would treat his version as the default. Defaults were how people disappeared. She opened the counterclaim form and started filling it out. Name, case number, jurisdiction. She worked in clean blocks, no wasted motion. On the requests section, she checked the box that asked the court to review full ownership interests related to the business. Then she attached what she had: the bank strip from Nia, the consulting fee line she'd circled, the vendor email, the blank disclosure page. Marisol slid her phone across the table. Use my scanner app, better resolution. Thanks. No speeches, just do it. Haley scanned each page and saved files with a strict naming pattern. 2025-03-14 _ bank restriction _ receipt. 2025-03-12 _ statement _ consulting fee. 2025-03-15 _ vendor email _ Caldwell Consulting, LLC. 2025-03-15 _ court filing _ blank disclosure. A checklist went on a fresh sticky note. Counterclaim filed / disclosure deadline / evidence log. Marisol watched the list, then the clock. You've got, 10 minutes? 8. The e-filing portal asked for one more verification. Then it asked again. Then it froze for a beat, as if considering whether she deserved access. Haley clicked once, not twice. She didn't slam keys or curse. She stared at the button labeled Submit, like it was a door that only opened one way. If I file wrong, I die by paperwork. If I don't file, I also die by paperwork. So I'll pick the option with a receipt. Her cursor moved. The clock shifted forward. She pressed Submit, and the screen spun into a loading circle before the exhale could finish. The loading circle spun long enough to feel personal. Then the page refreshed, and a bland confirmation message appeared. Filing received. Haley didn't celebrate. She hit Download Receipt, saved the PDF, and forwarded it to an email account Ethan couldn't guess. Marisol stood at the sink rinsing a mug, watching without asking for reassurance. Did it go through? It went through. Print it. Haley carried the laptop to the law library the next morning because printers at home were for grocery lists and broken dreams. At the counter, she paid for a card, typed the code, and listened to the machine rattle out 2 copies of the receipt. The case number sat near the top like a barcode on a new life. She clipped it to the front of her folder, then clipped the folder to the front of everything else, as if weight could make it real. At a long table, she opened her binder and rewrote her checklist neatly, the way she did at work before audits. A small meal came from a vending machine: crackers, a granola bar, a bottle of water. She ate it in 3 bites, threw the trash away, and went back to reading the disclosure rules. No scrolling, no doom searching, no staring at Ethan's last message. Just pages, dates, and what the court expected next. That evening, she slept on Marisol's couch for 4 straight hours. It wasn't restful, but it was uninterrupted. In the morning, she put on clean pants, tied her hair back, and packed the papers box with the day's stack. Marisol handed her a banana and a spare pen like it was a commute ritual. Do you want me to come with you? If you come, I'd have to admit I have a friend. Ethan would be shocked. Marisol snorted and went back to lacing her shoes. Outside, Chicago wind pushed at her coat as she crossed toward the courthouse. She didn't go in. She stayed on the sidewalk, reread the receipt, and checked the online docket on her phone until the entry appeared. Counterclaim filed, hearing to be scheduled. It looked fragile, like it might vanish if she blinked. Haley took a screenshot, saved it, and moved it into a folder labeled Do Not Lose. The calm lasted until noon. A notification hit her inbox from Ethan's attorney. Subject line in all the ways lawyers tried to sound civilized while swinging a bat. Motion for fees and sanctions. The attachment accused her of filing frivolous claims and demanded she pay their legal costs. The numbers were listed with zeros that felt designed to make a person fold. Marisol texted during her lunch break. "Any new nonsense?" Haley typed back. "Premium nonsense. They want me to fund their bullying." 2 minutes later, her phone lit up with calls from unfamiliar numbers, one after another. Each time she answered, the line went dead. She stopped picking up and watched the missed calls pile into a silent column of red. When she reached Marisol's building that afternoon, a gray sedan sat across the street. Windows up, no ticket, no hazards. She walked past it, key ready, and heard an engine turn over. The car rolled forward, parked again half a block away. Marisol opened the door. "That face means something's wrong." Haley didn't mention the car. She set the papers box on the table, pulled out a new court form, more blanks, more proofs of life. Halfway down, full legal name. Her pen paused just long enough to choose a handwriting. Then she wrote, folded the page so the line disappeared, and closed the folder. For an hour, she built exhibits like data sheets. Date, source, relevance. The bank strip went behind the joint account note. The vendor email followed. The e-filing receipt stayed on top. One thing nobody could dispute. At dusk, she walked back to the law library to print another set. The court, she'd learned, trusted paper more than truth. On the steps, an envelope waited under the door frame, the court's return address in the corner. She tore it open. Deposition scheduled, hearing date confirmed, penalties for failure to appear. The date was near enough to taste. Her phone buzzed. Ethan's name filled the screen. Haley let it ring, then slide into voicemail. She folded the notice, tucked it into the envelope, and didn't linger long enough to be watched. The next morning, she entered the Daily Center with a folder so tightly clipped it bowed at the corners. The security line moved in short bursts, shoes off, belts clinking, eyes forward. Haley set her keys and phone in the tray, stepped through, waited for the nod. Beyond the checkpoint, the courthouse rhythm took over. Posted calendars, sealed doors, voices kept just below anger. She walked toward the clerk's window, documents stacked in perfect order. Ethan was already there. He stood at the counter, polished and still, one hand on the marble as if it were his. Beside him, his lawyer, tailored suit, heavy briefcase, expression light as air. The attorney didn't turn when Haley approached. Ethan did. His mouth tightened like he'd been waiting, as if her schedule was a shared asset. The lawyer pivoted into her path with a practiced half-step, close enough to force her to slow down. "Miss Steinfeld, you're blocking a public hallway. I'm serving you." He held out a thick packet, clipped at the top, and spoke louder than he needed to. "Motion for protective order, limiting your access to company records and third-party vendors." Heads turned. A couple waiting near the elevators pretended not to listen, and listened anyway. "You've already interfered with operations," the lawyer continued. "This filing is necessary to prevent further harm." Haley took the packet with 2 fingers, like it might smear. "I'll read it." Ethan leaned in just enough to be heard by her and everyone else. "You really want to keep doing this?" A laugh drifted from down the hall. Carol Caldwell appeared with Mason, walking like they'd picked the courthouse as their morning coffee stop. Carol's eyes traveled from Haley's folder to the packet in her hand. "Haley, are you okay?" "Someone said you're staying somewhere else." Mason didn't bother to soften it. "Heard you're crashing on a couch." Haley didn't answer the way they wanted. She didn't deny it, and she didn't plead. She stepped around them and kept moving toward the clerk's window. Carol shifted again, subtle, forcing Haley to angle her shoulder like she was squeezing past a shelf. "All this because you can't let go," Carol said. Haley stopped just short of the counter, not looking at Carol, not looking at Mason. "This is because he changed the locks and cut off accounts." Carol's smile stayed polite. "That sounds like a personal issue." It's a court issue now. The clerk behind the glass glanced up at Haley's folder. Next. Haley slid her stack forward, then set the timeline and evidence log on top, the pages squared and numbered. The clerk's eyes flicked over the tabs, the binder clip, the labels written in plain block letters. What are you filing today? Supplemental disclosures and exhibits. And your attorney is? I don't have one. The clerk's eyebrows lifted, not unkind, just surprised. Pro se? Yes. A pause, then the clerk pushed a stamp pad closer. You'll need to sign here and initial there. Haley signed and passed the pages back through the slot. The stamp came down with a dull thud that sounded better than any pep talk. Behind her, Ethan's lawyer spoke again, as if the hallway was his conference room. For the record, we believe her claims are frivolous. Haley didn't spin around. She opened her folder, pulled out the receipt from her counterclaim, and laid it beside the stamped timeline. The clerk looked at it, then at the new motion packet Haley still held. You're receiving a lot of paper for someone without counsel. Haley kept her voice level. Yeah, I'm noticing. The clerk slid the stamped copies back. Keep these. You'll need them at the hearing. A court employee walked past, glanced at Haley's stack, and asked as he slowed near the window. You got representation, ma'am? Not yet. Haley tapped the thick folder once with her knuckles. But I have cardboard. The employee huffed a laugh that came out more like a cough, then kept walking. Her phone started vibrating again, persistent, a trapped insect against fabric. The screen lit through her pocket. She didn't pull it out. The clerk called toward the back office. Can someone verify this case number? A second clerk answered, and a moment later, a voice from the side window called out, Haley Steinfeld, step up. Haley stepped forward, stamped copies flat in her palm. Her phone buzzed, a calendar alert flashing. Court deadline, 48 hours. She slid the papers through the glass slot and stepped away. Outside, the phone kept vibrating. 5 unknown calls. 1 from Ethan. She powered it off and walked 2 blocks to a small CPA office above a dental clinic, the address from the letterhead. Inside, the receptionist looked from her folder to the clock. I need to speak with Robert, Haley said. He's unavailable. Haley left her name and asked for written confirmation before the day ended. The receptionist slid a clipboard forward. Are you a client? No. Then we can't discuss anything. Haley placed the photocopied statement on the counter, covering account numbers with her thumb. I'm asking what this line item refers to. A door opened and Robert appeared long enough to recognize her. I told you on the phone, he said. I'm not permitted. Do you handle Caldwell Consulting, LLC? Robert's eyes flicked to the paper, then away. If you need records, have your attorney subpoena them. She gathered her copies before anyone offered security. On the stairs, she photographed the number and sign. She ducked into a coffee shop, ordered drip, and took a table. Papers came out in layers. The bank strip from Nia, the vendor email header, the CPA letter, Ethan's blank disclosure page. Haley drew a timeline on a napkin, then copied it onto legal paper, lining dates with a ruler. The camera broken excuse sat on the same week as the first consulting transfer. The lock change followed the day her cloud account was flagged. She underlined each point, not dramatic, just methodical. Looking at the advisory fee, she muttered, someone was advising hard while I got kicked out. Across the top of her evidence log, Haley added a new column, narrative. Next to locks changed, she wrote, unstable spouse. Next to account restricted, she wrote, she can't pay. Next to the empty disclosure box, she wrote, there is nothing to see. A text from the neighbor popped again. Ethan says you drained funds. She saved a screenshot, dropped it into the same folder as the motion for sanctions, and highlighted the date. The smear and the filings were moving together, schedule perfect. When the barista asked if she wanted a refill, Haley said, only if it comes with subpoenas. She called the bank's main line and asked for a supervisor. After 3 transfers, a woman repeated the same policy. We can provide statements for what you're authorized to view. Authorized by whom? The account owner. It's a joint account. Not in our system at this moment. Haley ended the call, added partial records to her log, and stapled the bank pages behind the restriction receipt. 2 folders from her old cloud backup stayed empty. The deletion notice was the only trace. She wrote "missing" in red and left space for demands. Then she circled Ethan's motion and dated it. At a public computer station, Haley searched the Illinois Business Registry. Caldwell Consulting, LLC appeared with a filing date months before Ethan claimed the marriage was over. The registered agent listed a downtown address that matched the vendor email footer. She printed the page and clipped it behind the consulting invoices, labeling it public record. A man at the next terminal leaned over. "That's your ex's company?" "Apparently." "Sorry." Haley didn't respond. She opened a sheet and wrote a request list. Bank statements, vendor contracts, tax returns, device logs, maintenance records. Each line ended with the same word: produce today. At the coffee shop, Haley spread the printout beside the motion packet. She marked the LLC filing date on her timeline and drew an arrow to the week the doorbell camera broke. Another arrow ran to the night the locks changed. She called Marisol. "I think this was staged." "What part?" "The lock, the camera, the accounts?" Marisol didn't soften it. "Then stop treating it like confusion." Haley hung up, slid the papers into her folder, tightened the binder clip, and stepped outside with the case number visible. On the sidewalk, she opened her calendar and counted the days to the hearing. She called a legal helpline from a courthouse bench. After hold music and menu prompts, a voice answered. "Helpline, how can I assist?" "I need discovery guidance for a divorce case. I'm pro se." "You'll need an intake appointment." "When's the soonest?" "Next week?" Haley checked her calendar, then the court notice. The hearing came sooner. She circled the date hard enough to crease the page and kept the hotline on speaker. The woman kept talking about intake slots and eligibility. Haley asked for a checklist instead. "That's not how it works," the woman said. "We can tell you where to find the forms online." "Those forms have deadlines." "I know." "So do I." Haley ended the call. Back at Marisol's apartment, she spread the new notice, motion packet, and evidence log across the kitchen table. A second envelope waited, stamped order. The court wanted an exhibit list and financial disclosure, both due before deposition. Miss it, and her work wouldn't count. Her eyes drifted to the old suitcase by the wall, still scuffed from the porch. Not sentimental, just proof of how fast home could vanish. She could stay quiet, keep her job, and avoid conflict, or risk all of it to protect what was true on paper. Marisol came in from work, saw the table, and wordlessly slid over a pack of neon highlighters. "You're doing it again," she said. "Doing what?" "Trying to win without being seen." "I'm trying to file on time." "Then act like you're allowed to take up space." Haley tested a yellow marker on a scrap. "Didn't think neon could save my life." She built 2 identical packets, one for the clerk, one for herself. Page numbers bottom right, exhibit labels top left, each document dated and sourced. The evidence log became a 1-page summary, concise, legible. For the first time, it looked like a case. On a note card, she wrote her only answers: yes, no, I don't know, I can provide that in writing. Underneath, slow down, don't argue, let the paper talk. When her phone buzzed again, she turned it face down and kept working. At the law library the next day, she copied both packets, watched the counter climb, and waited as the clerk stamped the covers without reading. 48 hours left to file. Outside, the wind cut through her coat. She could still miss the deadline. Let Ethan win by default. Easier, safer, permanent. Instead, she walked to the courthouse drop box, slid her form through, and heard it land. A gray sedan idled nearby, moved when she turned away. She kept walking toward the train. That night, Marisol cleared a space on the counter. Haley entered each exhibit label and page range into the court portal. The system rejected the file twice before a green checkmark appeared. Marisol leaned on the doorway. You're really going to walk in there alone? I'm walking in prepared. They'll try to make you look unstable. They already did. Marisol flipped through the motion for sanctions, stopped at the fee total, and let out a low whistle. That number's a personality. Haley slid the stamped receipt to the top of the stack and set the neon highlighter beside it like a tool, not a joke. She zipped her folder, checked her phone, silent, and reached for her coat. At the door, Marisol handed her a spare battery pack. Take it. Haley nodded, slung her bag over her shoulder, and stepped into the hall. Haley, are you sure? She didn't answer. At the courthouse, she stepped out of the elevator with her folder pressed to her ribs. The air smelled of toner and damp wool. A bailiff checked her name and pointed her to a bench. Ethan sat up front with his lawyer, both facing the judge's seat like her side of the room didn't exist. When Haley took her place opposite them, Ethan looked up as if surprised she'd shown up. His lawyer smirked, sliding a pad forward. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The bailiff called the case number. Haley sat when told, opened her binder, and unclipped the first stack. Miss Steinfeld, you're appearing pro se today? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Caldwell is represented? Yes, Your Honor. Ethan leaned back, arms loose, like he'd already won something just by showing up with counsel. He glanced at Haley's thick folder and let out a soft chuckle that carried. She can't even afford a lawyer, Your Honor. A couple of people behind them made a noise that might have been laughter, might have been discomfort. Haley didn't turn around. This is just bitterness dressed up as paperwork. His attorney didn't correct him. Haley slid her exhibit list toward the judge, then pushed a second pile forward, pages numbered and clipped. I'm requesting limited discovery and a review of the company ownership because assets are being concealed. The judge glanced down, then up. Keep it concise. Yes, Your Honor. She reached for the bank statement copy, the CPA letterhead, the business registry printout, and Ethan's filed disclosure form all at once. The stacks slid, corners catching, and one page fluttered to the floor. Before Haley could bend, Ethan's attorney spoke. Objection. Foundation. Objection. Hearsay. Not in evidence. The judge's pen tapped once. Ms. Steinfeld, you can't just hand me a pile and call it proof. It's a timeline with sources. She's attempting to access proprietary records and intimidate vendors. We're asking for a protective order and fees for frivolous filings. Haley picked up the fallen page and set it back on top, lining edges with the precision she used at work. Her mouth opened, then closed, and she tried again with the note card answer she'd written. I'm not contacting vendors to harass them. I'm requesting records relevant to marital assets. Do you have direct evidence of hidden accounts today? I have inconsistencies in public records. My access to full statements is restricted by Mr. Caldwell. She's trying to ruin me because I ended it. The judge looked over the packet, then lifted his gaze to Haley. Here's what we're going to do. I'm granting a temporary limitation on access to company documents beyond what is required by standard disclosure. You may file supplemental exhibits in proper form by the deadline, and you may request discovery through the correct procedures. If you miss that deadline, I will not consider late materials. Haley nodded, because nodding was the only move available. And, Mr. Caldwell, stop restricting joint accounts in a way that prevents reasonable living expenses. Your Honor, he has concerns about misuse. Noted. Next matter. The hearing ended as abruptly as it began. In the hallway, Haley received the written order from the clerk and read the first line twice. Temporary limitation. Supplemental filing required. Ethan walked past her without slowing, satisfied with the word limitation, even if the judge had scolded him about expenses. His attorney stopped close, voice low enough for only her to hear. You're making this worse for yourself. Haley folded the order in half, then in half again, and slid it into her folder like it belonged there. She stepped to the wall beside the water fountain and opened her folder again. Using the pen Marisol had handed her, Haley wrote a new label on the top page. Supplemental Exhibits. Format required. A woman in a knit hat, waiting with her own thin packet, nodded at Haley's stack. They make you feel small on purpose. I'm learning the syllabus late, Haley said. The woman gave a short, sympathetic smile and walked away when her name was called. Haley slid the pen behind the binder clip, checked the clerk's stamp time, and scanned the order for the filing cutoff before the hallway swallowed her in moving bodies. A security officer gestured toward a side exit as the crowd funneled out. "Ma'am, this way." Haley left the courthouse with the folded order in her folder and the new deadline already pinned in her calendar. The wind pushed at her coat while she walked, but she kept the same pace, eyes on the next errand instead of the last loss. A bank branch sat a few blocks away, and she headed there because paper orders didn't buy train fare. At the counter, she slid her ID and the account information across. The teller was a different woman than last time, younger, careful, and tired in the way people get when they're trained to say no politely. "I need a cashier's check for filing fees. I also need confirmation of the restriction date on my joint account." The teller typed, frowned, and tilted the screen away as if it might bite. "There's still a restriction. I can't issue a cashier's check from that account." "From what account can you issue it? Do you have another account with us?" Haley didn't answer with sarcasm. She pulled up her personal savings on the app, the one she'd kept separate before marriage because it was easier at tax time. The balance had been there yesterday. Today it was missing 2 digits. The teller printed a small slip and slid it forward. "This debit is pending." "It looks like an automatic transfer." Haley read the reference code and took a photo of it. "Who authorized the transfer?" "I can't see that." "Can you see where it's going?" "I can only tell you it's leaving this account." Haley nodded once, tucked the slip into her folder, and stepped away. On the walk back, her phone buzzed with an email from her company address. The subject line was bland enough to be dangerous. Notice of administrative leave. She stopped near a corner trash can and opened it. Effective immediately, she was placed on temporary leave pending an investigation into alleged misuse of internal financial information. She was instructed not to contact clients, not to access company systems, and not to discuss the matter with coworkers. Her badge access would be suspended. Haley reread the line about alleged misuse and then clicked her VPN app without thinking. It rejected her login. She called HR. The call went to voicemail. "This is Dana," the recording said. "Leave a message." Haley kept her voice flat. "This is Haley Steinfeld. I received the notice. I need to know what allegation was made and whether it came from Ethan Caldwell or his counsel. Call me back." She ended the call and kept walking, because standing still on a city sidewalk didn't change corporate decisions. Another message came in, this time from the CPA office email address. 3 sentences, no greeting. "I cannot be involved. Do not contact this office again. Any future communication must be through counsel." Haley saved it, labeled it Witness Withdraws, and moved it into her evidence folder. Then she tried her old backup cloud account again, hoping the earlier deletion was isolated. The login worked. The folder list appeared. She tapped the one marked Taxes, and the screen refreshed to an error. Access revoked. A second later, a security alert arrived. New device request approved. Haley looked up, scanning the street, and noticed the same gray sedan parked at the curb with its lights off. It wasn't moving, but the engine heat blurred the air above the hood. When she walked past, the brake lights brightened, then faded. That night, she took the train to Marisol's building and walked from the station with her folder held under her arm like it was fragile. The sedan wasn't at the corner, but another car rolled slowly behind her for half a block, then turned away without signaling. She reached Marisol's door, unlocked it, and stepped into the kitchen where the overhead light made everything look unfinished. Marisol stood at the fridge with the door open, staring at a shelf that held half a carton of eggs and a jar of pickles. "We're doing great," Marisol said. "The fridge is basically a museum." Haley set the folder down and opened her bag. "I got benched at work." "For what?" "Misuse of internal information." Marisol closed the fridge door hard enough to rattle the magnets. "So he's poisoning your paycheck now." Haley pulled out another envelope, this one from Ethan's attorney. The letter demanded withdrawal of the counterclaim and payment of fees by a date printed in bold. The amount was large enough to be theatrical. Marisol leaned over the table, reading. They want you to pay them for suing you. They're calling it sanctions. Haley opened the freezer and found 2 frozen burritos and nothing else. Actually, she said, placing them on the counter, I'm living exactly how they described me. Nothing. Marisol didn't laugh. She grabbed a pen and wrote the fee deadline on a sticky note, then stuck it to the cabinet door at eye level. Eat. Then we plan. A knock sounded in the hallway. Not sharp, not urgent. Just a tap, like the building reminding her it existed. Marisol checked the peephole and shook her head. Mail drop, she said. They left it. Haley opened the door and found a court envelope on the mat, her name typed cleanly on the front. She tore it open right there, didn't even bring it to the table. The first line hit like cold water. Order to show cause. Marisol called from the kitchen. Haley? She didn't answer, eyes fixed on the page while her fingers tightened around the paper until the edge bent. Haley stood in the hallway with the order to show cause spread open, reading the deadlines like they were speed limits. Marisol hovered in the kitchen doorway, waiting for a sentence that would explain the whole thing. None came. Haley folded the notice, set it on the table, and pulled the papers box closer. This is the part where they hope you miss a step, Marisol said. I won't, Haley said. Marisol pointed at the cabinet where the sticky notes had multiplied. You're going to need more than stubborn. Haley didn't argue. She opened her folder, slid out the motion for sanctions, then the bank slip, then the business registry printout. The evidence log went on top. The stack looked less like panic and more like a system. Marisol watched her line up the corners. Eat first, Marisol said. Haley unwrapped a burrito, took 3 bites, and kept sorting with her free hand. When the burrito was gone, she washed the plate, dried it, and returned to the table without comment. Marisol didn't pretend that was normal, but she didn't criticize it either. She grabbed her keys. Come with me tomorrow, Marisol said, not to beg, to get the right forms. The next morning, Haley followed Marisol to the community center where she worked. A few people sat in plastic chairs, holding folders that looked like they'd been carried through rain. Marisol nodded at a volunteer, traded a brief word, and pointed Haley toward an empty desk. No sob story, Marisol said, just dates and documents. A staff member named Tanya sat down across from Haley with a clipboard. Divorce case? Tanya asked. Yes, Haley said, pro se. Tanya slid a packet across the desk. This is a response template for an order to show cause. Fill it out, attach your exhibits, and keep a proof of service. We can't represent you, but we can keep you from missing the obvious. Haley flipped through the pages, then set them beside her evidence log. Thank you, she said. Tanya glanced at the log and raised her eyebrows. Most people show up with feelings, Tanya said. You brought timestamps. Marisol didn't smile, but her posture eased a notch, like that comment mattered. On the way out, a man in the waiting area asked Marisol where to find the bus schedule. Marisol answered without rushing. Haley held the door for an older woman and stepped back when the woman moved slowly. Nobody in the room looked like they expected a miracle. They looked like they needed procedures that worked. At the law library, the same librarian from before recognized Haley's binder and motioned her toward the reference desk. You're back, the librarian said. Still unstapling my life, Haley said. The librarian's mouth twitched. What do you need? Exhibit formatting, Haley said. Citations, page numbering that won't get tossed. The librarian pulled a thin guide from a shelf and tapped a paragraph. Label everything. If you reference it in your response, the judge should be able to find it in 10 seconds. Haley nodded, then went to a long table and rebuilt her packet. The response to show cause stayed short. Dates, compliance steps, and a request for relief. She attached her stamped filing receipt, the restriction notice from the bank, the LLC registry page, and Ethan's blank disclosure box. Each exhibit got a cover sheet. At the photocopy station, she printed 2 full sets and clipped them so tight the paper bowed. On the front cover of the first exhibit, Haley wrote in block letters, "Exhibit A, because I prefer letters over feelings." She didn't laugh. She simply slid the cover under the binder clip and kept going. Her phone buzzed with an email while the copier warmed up. Ethan's attorney, the same man who'd warned her she was making things worse, had written a message that started with, "In the interest of resolving this quickly." The tone was softer, almost helpful. "We're willing to discuss a settlement," Marisol read over Haley's shoulder later, voice flat. "With conditions," Haley said. Marisol scanned the next line and snorted. "They want you to drop anything related to the company." Haley didn't respond with anger. She added the email to her log, labeled it "Settlement Overture," and highlighted the date. Back at the courthouse, she joined the filing line with her packet pressed against her coat. The clerk took the stack, flipped through the tabs, and looked up. "Response to show cause?" the clerk asked. "Yes," Haley said. "And a motion to compel limited discovery tied to disclosed and undisclosed business interests." The clerk stamped the top page, then the proof of service, then each exhibit cover sheet. The sound of the stamp was steady, repetitive, indifferent. Haley slid her copy back into her folder and tightened the binder clip. "Next," the clerk called. Haley stepped away, pulling her receipt toward the front pocket, and her phone vibrated with a new text from an unknown number. "Don't let the judge read your full name." Haley arrived at the main courtroom with her folder pressed against her coat. The unknown text sat on her lock screen, but she didn't open it again. She signed in, took a seat, and set the suitcase beside her chair because there wasn't room anywhere else. People filed in with briefcases and coffee, talking in short bursts that stopped when the bailiff walked by. Ethan Caldwell entered with his attorney and two family members, Carol and Mason, as if this was a theater show and they'd bought the seats. Ethan glanced at Haley's table and smiled the way he did when a spreadsheet didn't add up for someone else. Carol leaned toward Mason. "She really came." Mason answered without lowering his voice. "With that suitcase, that's commitment." Ethan's attorney flipped open a laptop. Ethan leaned back, hands folded, watching Haley sort her tabs by color. The bailiff called the room to order. "All rise." Haley stood, then sat when the judge motioned everyone down. The judge looked at the docket, then at the tables. "Appearances." Ethan's attorney spoke first, smooth and fast. "Your Honor, for the petitioner, Ethan Caldwell." Haley rose. "Haley Steinfeld, respondent. I'm representing myself." Ethan let out a laugh that wasn't aimed at the judge. She can't even afford a lawyer. A few people chuckled, the kind of laugh that asked permission from the room. The judge didn't react, but the sound hung for a second. "Ms. Steinfeld," the judge said, "you have filings pending. Keep your presentation organized." "Yes, Your Honor." Haley opened her folder, pulled out her exhibit list, and slid a copy to the clerk. Her hands moved like she was setting up a meeting, not asking for mercy. "Exhibit 1 is the court receipt for my counterclaim," she said. "Exhibit 2 is the bank restriction notice. Exhibit 3 is the business registry record for Caldwell Consulting, LLC. Ethan's attorney rose. "Objection to relevance, Your Honor." Haley didn't turn toward him. She looked at the judge and waited. The judge held up a finger. "One at a time. Ms. Steinfeld, proceed." Haley flipped to the next tab, reading the page number out loud before she offered it. She kept her sentences short, almost boring, and that seemed to irritate Ethan more than anger would have. Ethan leaned forward. "This is what she does," he said, loud enough for the gallery. "She hoards paperwork and calls it proof." Haley placed the papers down, squared them, and moved on. Exhibit 4 is the vendor email showing recurring advisory fees paid to that LLC. Ethan's attorney started to speak, then stopped, watching the judge's expression shift from patient to attentive. The judge tapped a pen against the bench. "Mr. Caldwell, your counsel will speak for you." Ethan spread his hands like the victim of manners. "Sure, of course." Haley offered the exhibit to the clerk. The clerk stamped it received for the record. For the first time that morning, Ethan's smile tightened. The judge read down the filing list again, pausing at the respondent's line. "To make a clear record," the judge said, "state your full legal name." Haley stood. She gave the name as it appeared on her forms, the one she usually kept folded away on page 4. Haley Catherine Steinfeld Wexler. The judge repeated it, louder, enunciating each piece as if it mattered for the transcript. Haley Catherine Steinfeld Wexler. The room went still. Not awkward, not tender, just suddenly attentive. A woman in the second row stopped mid-note. Ethan's attorney's eyes lifted from his laptop. Carol's face lost its practiced smile, replaced by a quick calculation that didn't finish. Mason whispered, "Wait, Wexler?" Ethan's head turned, sharp. What? The back doors opened and a man in a dark suit walked in with a leather portfolio under his arm. He didn't rush, and nobody stopped him. He moved to the counsel table and nodded to the judge. "Your Honor," he said, "Daniel Wexler, Wexler and Hart. I'm here to enter an appearance for Ms. Steinfeld Wexler, pro bono, if the court will allow." Ethan's attorney stood halfway. "Your Honor!" The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Wexler, you're willing to represent her without fee?" "Yes, Your Honor." Haley sat slowly. Her gaze dropped to the suitcase at her feet. The corners were scuffed, the zipper uneven, and it looked absurd next to the polished shoes around it. She didn't smile, but her mouth twitched once, like the suitcase had done more work than it should. The judge nodded toward the clerk. "Brief recess, 10 minutes. Counsel will confer and update appearances." Daniel Wexler leaned in, voice low, respectful. "We need Exhibit 7 right away." Haley opened her folder, found the tab, and started turning pages as the clerk called out again. "All rise!" The courtroom broke for recess, and Haley followed Daniel Wexler into the corridor with her folder pressed to her side. Ethan stayed at counsel table, talking fast to his attorney, but his eyes followed her like she'd taken something off his desk. Daniel didn't glance back. "We'll use the next 10 minutes to get you protected," Daniel said. "Protected from what?" "From contact, from sloppy filings, from being alone in the record." He steered her to a small waiting area, asked a clerk for a temporary appearance form, then set a pen in front of Haley. A court document sat on top. Notice of appearance. The name line was blank. "Write it exactly as it appears on your ID," Daniel said. Haley wrote Haley Catherine Steinfeld Wexler in steady block letters and signed under it without covering the page. Daniel watched, then nodded once, like a lock clicking. Outside the courtroom, Ethan tried to cut across the hall as recess ended. He didn't shout, he just approached with that familiar, close-range confidence, phone in hand. "Haley, we need to talk." "Put it in writing," she said. "This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing yourself." Daniel stepped between them. "Mr. Caldwell, speak to counsel." "I'm not talking to her lawyer," Ethan snapped. "This is my wife." "Not in this hallway," Daniel said. "Not without me." The bailiff called everyone back, and Haley returned to her seat, the suitcase still beside her chair. She didn't tuck it away. It sat there, like a fact. During the resumed hearing, Daniel spoke for her, asking the judge to preserve records and to compel production tied to the LLC and the tax items. Haley slid him Exhibit 7 when he asked, flipping to the page number he needed, then resting her hands on the table while Ethan's attorney objected and the judge set deadlines. By afternoon, Daniel had her in an elevator headed to his firm's offices. The space wasn't flashy, just clean and busy. A young associate met them at reception with a tablet and a lanyard badge. "Welcome," the associate said. "I'm Priya Patel. We'll get you set up." Haley set the old suitcase under the conference room chair without apology. Priya placed a packet on the table. Pro bono agreement, conflict disclosure, client intake, and a single sheet labeled verification of name. "Initial where highlighted," Priya said. "Sign the last page." Haley read each header, then signed her full name again, the long version, on every line that asked. No hand hovered to block it. Daniel pointed at the motion for sanctions Ethan had filed. "They're trying to scare you out of discovery." "Can we still request it?" "We can, and we will. But we do it clean. We don't chase vendors. We chase orders." Haley slid her evidence log forward. "This is the order I want," she said, tapping the column that listed the missing statements and device access changes. Daniel looked at it. "That's a reasonable ask. It's also the only way to know what he moved." Daniel didn't argue. He made notes, then asked her to walk him through the timeline, date by date, while Priya scanned each exhibit and created a list. When Priya returned, she held out a building access card with Haley's name printed above a barcode. "Here's your badge for meetings and document drop-off." "Thanks," Haley said, clipping it to her folder. Priya smiled, waiting. "I came here through a divorce," Haley added. "That's a weird career path." Priya's smile turned into a quick laugh that stopped before it became a moment. Daniel moved to practical rules. From now on, no calls with Ethan, no parking lot conversations, no texts. Haley opened her phone settings and blocked Ethan's number while Daniel watched. "All communication goes through you," she said. "Exactly," Daniel said. "If he wants to negotiate, he emails. If he wants to threaten, he emails. Either way, it becomes evidence." That night, Haley returned to Marisol's apartment with a folder labeled Wexler and Hart and a stack of printed deadlines. Marisol looked at the badge, then at Haley's face. "They showed up?" "They did." Marisol nodded once, like she'd been waiting for a system to finally notice. Haley cleared a spot on the kitchen table, set the suitcase beside the chair, and started relabeling tabs the way Daniel requested. Before bed, she opened the suitcase and found the folded paper she'd pulled from the lining days ago, edges worn from being hidden. She smoothed it, slipped it into a fresh folder, and clipped it shut with a binder clip marked Final. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Tomorrow, cross-examine." Haley stood, turned on the bathroom faucet, and let the water run over her hands while the screen stayed lit on the counter. Daniel Wexler met Haley at the courthouse entrance before the final session and took the suitcase from her hand like it was just another briefcase. He didn't ask if she was ready. He checked her exhibit tabs and nodded at the page numbers. "Stay on the facts." "That's all I brought." The courtroom filled the way it always did, with people who had time to watch other people's lives. Ethan arrived with his attorney and Carol behind him. No jokes this time, no extra volume. When Haley sat, Ethan's eyes went to the suitcase by her chair and then away, as if looking at it might make it real. The judge called the case, confirmed appearances, and reminded everyone that today was about disclosures, ownership, and credibility. "We maintain her claims are exaggerated and harmful. We maintain the records were manipulated and withheld." Daniel stood for the first witness, a company bookkeeper who had tried to dodge the subpoena until the judge signed the order to compel. Haley watched Daniel's pen move as he asked about login changes, routing numbers, and who approved the recurring consulting payments. "Did you ever see Caldwell Consulting LLC in your normal workflow?" "Not until the day the locks were changed." Ethan's attorney objected, tried to reframe it as a clerical oversight, and the judge asked for the registry printout and the bank restriction record. Daniel handed them up without drama, each page already tagged to a tab and a number. When Ethan took the stand, he leaned toward the microphone the way he used to lean across their kitchen island, sure that confidence counted as evidence. "She's trying to punish me for moving on." "You moved on by changing the locks, correct?" "I protected my property." "You protected it by restricting a joint account." Ethan's eyes flicked to the gallery, searching for agreement, and found none. Carol stared at her hands in her lap, lips pressed, while Mason shifted like he wished he could exit without being noticed. The judge asked Ethan about the blank disclosure box, the missing device access logs, and the timing of the camera break that Ethan had mentioned in the hallway months earlier. "I don't remember exactly." "You remember enough to file sanctions." Daniel didn't grin. He simply offered the court the email where Ethan's lawyer had called her filings frivolous and then, days later, offered a quick settlement if she dropped the company claim. The judge read it, set it down, and asked both sides to step back while he reviewed the proposed orders. No one talked during that stretch. Even Ethan's attorney stopped tapping his pen. Haley kept her hands folded on her folder and watched the clerk stack documents for signature. When the judge looked up, his voice was firm and procedural, the way a final answer should sound. Mr. Caldwell concealed marital assets and interfered with access to joint funds. You will return the assets taken and reimburse the respondent for damages to her reputation. Compliance is due by the dates listed in the order. Ethan's attorney started to speak, then closed his mouth, already reaching for his briefcase. Ethan stared at the bench as if the judge had misread a number, and Carol didn't touch his arm. In the hallway afterward, two men Haley recognized from Ethan's industry events walked past him without a greeting, eyes forward, shoulders tight. Ethan called one name, and the man pretended not to hear. At the clerk's desk, Haley signed for the certified copies while Daniel checked the order line by line. "How many copies do you need?" "2. One for me and one for the suitcase." The clerk paused, then slid 2 stamped sets across the counter without smiling. Haley tucked them into her folder, the paper heavier than it looked. She walked into the lobby wearing the tailored vest Daniel's office had insisted on, not for show, just because pockets helped. Daniel kept pace beside her, carrying nothing but a thin portfolio and the calm of someone used to courts. "There's one more document." He handed her a new packet with a title on the first page, Consulting Agreement. Haley stopped near the reception desk, scanned the first paragraph, and pulled a pen from her vest pocket. Daniel angled the packet so she could sign on the highlighted line. "This is for you, not for your family name." "I'm not asking for charity." "Good." Haley arrived before most of the building had decided to wake up. The lobby of Wexler and Hart smelled like disinfectant and printer paper, which felt familiar enough to work. She signed the consulting agreement again at a reception desk, slid the firm's copy into a folder, and tucked her copy into the old suitcase without ceremony. Priya Patel met her by the elevators with the visitor badge swapped for a permanent one. "Morning, Haley." "Morning. You're officially on the calendar now." Haley clipped the badge to her vest and adjusted the strap on the suitcase. The badge didn't make her taller, but it made security stop asking questions. Outside, Chicago wind pushed commuters toward their trains. Haley walked 3 blocks to the community center where Marisol worked, balancing a cardboard box against her hip. The box held blank exhibit covers, binder clips, a list of court helplines, and the simple 1-page guide on keeping a paper log. At the front desk, Tanya looked up and recognized the box before she recognized Haley. "This is for someone?" "For whoever shows up next," Haley said. "No name?" "No name." Tanya nodded, slid the box under the counter, and wrote "Forms" on it with a marker like it was always meant to be there. Marisol caught her near the hallway, coat half on, coffee in hand. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," Haley said. Marisol's eyes flicked to the suitcase. "Still carrying that thing?" "It rolls," Haley said, and kept walking before gratitude turned into a speech. Her new apartment was a studio in a converted brick building, small enough that every sound had a source. The landlord handed over 2 keys and a paper lease. Haley signed, checked the move-in date, and paid the deposit with a cashier's check Daniel had arranged. Nobody asked about Ethan. A folding table became a desk. Haley unpacked the suitcase first. One folder labeled Court, one labeled Work, and a thin envelope marked Receipts. Clothes went into one drawer, toiletries into the bathroom cabinet, and the rest stayed boxed until she decided it deserved space. The suitcase slid under the table, not hidden, just parked. She took a photo of the new keys on the table and sent it to Marisol with a single line. "Got in. Thank you." Marisol replied a minute later. "Proud of you. Also, change your locks." Haley did that afternoon and handed the spare to the building manager instead of anyone else. Daniel called once, then followed his own rule and sent an email when she didn't pick up. The subject line read, "Next Steps." It listed deadlines, meeting times, and a reminder that Ethan's counsel had to communicate through the firm. Haley forwarded it to herself and printed it, then pinned it to the wall with painter's tape. That evening, she opened a new checking account, rerouted deposit, and printed the confirmation page. A short email went to Daniel with one request. Never pass along Ethan's calls, no matter how they sounded. Daniel replied with a single line that felt like a rule, not comfort. Understood. Everything in writing. Haley taped the reply above her desk next to the court receipt and set the suitcase by the door with a roll of labels in its side pocket. When Marisol stopped by to drop off spare hangers, Haley handed her a small envelope for the center's bus cards and didn't explain it. For emergencies, Haley said. I'll pretend I didn't cry, Marisol said. On her first official day, she showed up early again, not because she liked mornings, but because elevators were less crowded. The suitcase rode beside her like a coworker that never talked back. A receptionist waved her through without checking ID. That still felt strange. In the elevator, a man in a suit glanced at the suitcase and then at her badge. Traveling? He asked. Just organized, Haley said. He laughed once, politely, and looked at the floor numbers. Priya met her outside a conference room with a slim laptop and a stack of clean legal pads. We're starting with compliance review, Priya said. Haley took a pad and a pen. I can do boring, she said. Perfect, Priya answered. Boring keeps clients alive. They walked down a corridor lined with names on glass doors. The one that matched hers had been printed overnight. Haley K. Steinfeld Wexler, consultant. She didn't touch it, didn't stare, just pulled her badge from her pocket and opened the door when Priya nodded. A colleague at the room's entrance looked up from his notes. Haley? Yes, she said. He held the door wider. Grab a seat. We're starting. Haley set the suitcase beside the chair, opened her laptop, and joined the meeting while the first agenda slide loaded.